Hey Gators and sports fans, get all your Gator talk, news, analysis, and opinions on the Pod Up with Matthews in the Morning podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform or watch us on Facebook Live between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. every weekday. Pod Up, because we are Gator fans. So say, it's great to be a Florida Gator.
Good morning and welcome to a Thursday edition of Pod Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Excuse me, it's Thursday. You know what that means. That means we're going to talk a little college football with our college football analyst, Brent Beaird, on the Titan More Hotline. Second half of the show today, we're going to talk a little college baseball, Gators, with Nick De La Torre from GatorsTerritory, Rivals.com. But first, let's go ahead and, first, before I get to Brent, Gator softball has their first game today in the SEC tournament up in Tuscaloosa. They face at noon the Mississippi State Lady Bulldogs, and also track is at the SEC outdoor track meet this weekend. But first, let's go to the Titan More Hotline. Good morning, Brent. How are you, my man?
Shane, I'm doing well. I'm excited about this cool weather coming up for the next few days. This rain's going to end, and it's going to be the high tomorrow, 74, which is an absolute gift in May. And for that softball tournament up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, as you can imagine, it will be cooler too. So I'm excited about the cool weather, and I'm very excited about the college football preseason magazines being on the shelf. So we may have one, if not two, in Lindy's and Athlon, Shane, the next time we talk next Thursday.
Brent, are you one of those guys that like goes to Publix every morning waiting for it to hit the shelf?
It may not be every morning, but I do know when the shipments come in. So I kind of know. I have some strategic places that I go to get them. I'm a little bit sad because, and I need to double check with this. Understand that you remember Street and Smith, the magazine for years that would. And Shane, do you remember what they did on the cover? They would have a player on the cover, and he would have his helmet on. It would either be the single bar, or it would be. Or there would not be any face mask at all. You remember that from days gone by?
Yeah, I do remember that. Phil Steele, who does a tremendous job with his magazine, that guy has more stats in there than you can imagine. He's already come out with his preseason top 10. Any surprises, Brent?
No, really not. I mean, it's pretty typical, particularly in the top 5. Bama, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Ohio State. And we'll see the same thing in the preseason magazines. A&M, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Iowa State, and Cincinnati. I think a couple of schools in there worth noting the job that Matt Campbell has done at Iowa State. Shane, I've seen Iowa State ranked as high as 4 in some of the early top 25s, and again, the job that Cincinnati has done with Luke Fickell, our listeners may remember this is the club that nearly beat Georgia in the bowl game last year, Georgia hitting a 50-plus yard field goal to win that game, or Cincinnati wins it. So needless to say, Fickell's done a great job in Cincinnati, hadn't he, Shane?
There's no question about it. We got a couple Facebook Lives brought to you by Meldon Law, the only official law firm partner of the Florida Gators. Lauren says he has to order his online because if he bought them locally, he's got Ohio State and Michigan players on the cover. He lives up north. John wants to know, Brent, what is your go-to preseason magazine?
Probably Lindy's does as good a job as any because they've got your depth chart. And look, I know with the transfer portal, that'll change, but they've also got your roster. They've got the schedule. They've got a breakdown. I mean, I like Phil Steele like Shane does. And the great thing Steele does, people may not realize this, out of the 130 football schools in Division I, still interview, and I mean interviews with an hour interview, probably about 100 coaches. I mean, Shane, that's unheard of, is it not, to have that kind of access to different coaches? He comes out usually about a month later. The only real problem I have with Phil Steele is I'm up to trifocals now, Shane, and you know how small that type is for Phil Steele.
Yes,
it's a challenge.
Yeah, he has a lot of information in there. Brent, a lot of people may not realize this, but there is a national championship college football game taking place tomorrow between the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State against Sam Houston.
Listen, that's going to be a really good game. Frankly, this is when they seeded them, this is a 1 versus 2 game. Understand they haven't had a 1 versus 2 game since 2011. Now, look, this is a pretty good brand of football. I'm curious if you've seen any of this so far. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know most of us haven't sat down and watched ever play, but they've done a really good job. The big picture here is, do they look at the success they've had with this, because they've had publicity they would have never gotten. And 2 is for the non-Power Fives, and I think there's a sentiment growing for this, Shane, is one day do the non-Power Fives maybe move their season to the spring, have their own TV schedule, have their own playoffs, and that they would get publicity that they've never gotten before.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was going to ask you, so these boys are playing for the national title tomorrow, and then they're going to have 2 months off, basically. Then they're going to have training camp again for the fall, right?
I think that's right. That's a really good question. I need to double check on that and actually see how that's going to work with them. But I really do wonder if they may not take a look at how successful this was and keep this in mind. Now, they may go back to a regular schedule and then maybe do something down the road, but I'll be very curious on how this playing in the spring will affect them in the next few years.
Are you tired of living with chronic joint pain? There are new breakthrough treatments at QC Kinetics here in North Central Florida that not only alleviate your pain, they speed up the healing process. Schedule your free consultation at QC Kinetics. Give them a call, 352-400-4550. Speaking with Brent Beaird here on the Titan and More Hotline, you can follow Brent on Twitter at Brent Beaird. All right, Brent, there's some new rules. Seems like there are new rules every time I talk to you. There's new rules in college football about contact and practice. It's pretty much becoming very similar to the NFL, how they really don't have any contact at practice, and people wonder why defenses can't tackle anybody.
Right. I agree with that totally. Now, the Division I Council will consider these changes on May the 19th. But basically what this is, college football teams will be required to hold at least 7 padless practices, and the number of contact practices will be reduced from 21 to 18. This is suggested by the NCAA Oversight Committee. Now, where this came from, there was a study a few months ago about concussions. And what they came up with concussions is that a lot of the concussions occurred in preseason practice. So this is what's coming out, obviously, with player safety. They're doing away with the Oklahoma drill and drills of that nature. Now, there are a lot of people who don't like this. They're asking the question is, do we end up playing flag football one day? But again, we've had a situation over the last few years where even the college teams are probably hitting less. But Shane, you've got to hit some, don't you? Because you've got to be able to learn how to tackle and keep your head up. So I hope they can come up with some kind of compromise here.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned it before. Buddy Tevens, who was a longtime assistant here at Florida, who's been the head coach at Dartmouth for quite some time, you know, he invented one of those dummies that's a remote control. Yes. And they've been the last 3 or 4 years, Dartmouth, has not hit each other one time in practice. All they use are these remote control dummies, and supposedly they're pretty damn good on defense. We've had Sam McCorkle, who's his defensive coordinator, who was a great special teams player here at Florida, talk about it. So I don't know if many teams will start using the dummies that are remote controls or what. So we shall see. Brent, we got a couple Facebook Lives here. And back to the FCS kids. John says, brought to you by Melton Law, the only negative if they play in the spring is that the NFL says they aren't eligible for the draft. Is that part of it? That if they were to play in the spring, they wouldn't be eligible to be drafted?
Well, that's a good point. Frankly, we would just have to check on that. I have not heard that, but that would certainly be a real discouragement against it. But at the same time, I think there were some kids who were drafted on that level, but I'm not going to give an absolute on that. Maybe even some of our listeners may know more of an answer for that than we do, but that would certainly have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, Brent, there's like 10 games that they say will shape the college football playoff. Any of those stand out to you? I mean, they're all pretty damn good games.
Well, they are, aren't they? Georgia Clemson's listed as number one. Bama Miami playing in Atlanta. Also, the Cincinnati plays Notre Dame. We mentioned Cincinnati a minute ago. Now, if Cincinnati really wants to make a statement, and Notre Dame may be down a little bit, they lose most of that offensive line, and Ian Book will be gone. That's a game they really need to win. Iowa State could do themselves a lot of good, couldn't they, Shane, by beating Oklahoma? And also, and we've got the return match that never happened last year. Oregon goes to Ohio State, which if the Pac-12 really want to get something going, that's a game they need to win. Bama Florida is listed, also Bama A&M, and also North Carolina and Notre Dame. So, absolutely. That's not all of them, but that's some very significant games there.
Brent, the Georgia-Clemson game, that's week one. Is that a neutral site game?
Yeah, it's in Charlotte, as a matter of fact. Wow. Now, here's the deal with that game. If Clemson loses, they'll be given credit for beating Georgia, and then they will have your ACC schedule, which, again, they're the dominant team in that league. So even if Clemson loses to Georgia, it really won't be counted against them. Georgia, on the other hand, they've got the usual Auburn, Florida schools to deal with. And see, to me, in the SEC, what you've got that you really don't have in the ACC, and we cover the ACC pretty closely too, is you don't have a lot of those 50-50 games in order. And the thing that I mean is, the problem with Georgia is you lose to Clemson, and you've got to play the teams we just mentioned, but you never know when you're going to be having to deal with a Missouri, or heaven forbid, a few years ago, Shane, you remember South Carolina upset Georgia. Mm-hmm. So to me, right now, that's a game Georgia needs to win worse than Clemson does.
Yeah, I agree with that. Arch Manning, Cooper Manning's son, the grandson of Archie Manning. I think he's a 2023 kid. We all know he's highly touted. I'm going to go out on a limb right now, Brent, and I'm going to pick 3 schools where I think Arch will go to. Those 3 are Alabama, Texas, or LSU. Those are the 3 where I think he may end up. I may be 100% wrong, but I'm going to throw Clemson in there too. So I'm throwing 4 teams in there.
I wonder if Ole Miss may end up in there at some point also. And people may forget this, but Cooper was the Manning that really didn't play football very much because he had a spinal condition, and the doctors told him if he played, that it may affect him the rest of his life. Now, obviously, Arch would get a lot of advice from his grandfather and his two uncles, to say the least. But he would be visiting a lot of different schools. As Shane mentioned, he's a 2023 prospect. He's already been to Ole Miss and LSU, so it will be really fascinating to kind of see where this goes. I mean, the kid's incredible, frankly, and his recruitment will be unbelievable. But I'll say this for the Mannings. I don't think they'll let this be a circus, Shane. Do you? I think they've got enough experience and they've got enough common sense to where I think if any family can handle what's coming for him in terms of hype, I think the Manning family can do that.
Yeah, and that's one reason why I think he's going to go somewhere where the boys didn't go and Granddad didn't go.
Yeah, good point.
I don't think he's a good fit for what Ole Miss does offensively, because when you look at him, he's like Peyton and Eli. He's a pure pocket NFL type passer. Right. That's why I look at LSU, I look at Alabama, I look at Texas with now Sarkisian, and obviously Trevor Lawrence coming out of Clemson. So it'll be something fun to watch here in the next year or so. But, the Mannings, they know how to do it right. All right, Brent, I know you're an Alabama guy. Old Henry To'oto'o finally is heading to campus.
Well, he is, and they're quite excited about what he adds to the linebacker core. Now, he wasn't going to stay at Tennessee. There was some talk that he may go to Ohio State, and even Mike Farrell mentioned, as we talked about 2 weeks ago, about maybe some interest from Florida, but he does end up at Alabama. Now, the thing we've got to keep in mind here is the NCAA has already passed the transfer rule, but the conferences have got to also do the same. So what we're hearing is that the conferences that the committee who does this, and it's a group of presidents and chancellors, will meet either at the end of May or the first week of June, and basically put the rubber stamp on it. At that point, and again, we mentioned Mike Farrell of Rivals. Farrell had an article out that said there is a chance that if the presidents get really concerned about this being the Wild Wild West, when this goes into effect, that they may even stay with the original rule that if you transfer within the conference, you have to sit out a year. Now, I can't imagine them hurting the conference in recruiting by doing that. So I'm going to say they're going to rubber stamp it. But Shane, frankly, and we say this until it happens, when you've got a group of presidents and chancellors, they think differently than we do. And sometimes you never quite know what they might do.
No, I agree. Refresh your vehicle and your brand with a vehicle wrap from Wrap Spot. May's your lucky month at Wrap Spot. Mention promo code Shane to receive 13% off your vehicle wrap. Speaking with Brent Beaird on the Titan MR hotline, we'll be joined about 10 or 15 minutes with Nick De La Torre from Gators Territory, talking a little Gator baseball. Okay, we've talked about this several times on the show, but it's getting ready to happen. And this name, image, and likeness, Brent, I understand it, but you talking about in the Wild Wild West with just transferring, this damn name, image, and likeness is going to make college football. It's going to drive coaches out of the business, I think. I just don't know how they're going to control it. What are your thoughts?
They don't know that either, frankly. And there are a lot of questions here. And again, we mentioned Mike Farrell a couple of times. He did a good article this week, and I give him credit for this, on the questions with the NIL. Will there be a cap on how much players can make? How will endorsements work with compliance? Can players hire agents? Does the money go into a trust, or do they get paid immediately? What kind of endorsements are okay and what kind are not? Can high school prospects benefit from the NIL? And what happens if a player transfers in the midst of a deal? Mm-hmm. So, look, we understand the NCAA is going to try to put out some basic guidelines. Now, until we get 2 or 3 years into this, we really don't know how any of this stuff's going to interact. So it's still so many questions. And your point's a good one. Is Shane, to dovetail what you said, I wonder if this becomes such a headache for head coaches that some of the guys near retirement age may retire early.
Yeah, because Brent, I mean, like I said, there's still so many question marks out there, and I've brought it up on our show many, many times. Let's just use a Kyle Trask, for example, from last year, the tremendous year he had. He had an opportunity to come back with the COVID, but let's just say he was a sophomore or junior in a regular type season. Like I said, I don't know all the rules. I don't think they do, but he throws for over 4,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, 5,000, whatever it was he did. Crazy year. And let's just say we were in the world of the NIL and Florida, or some car dealer was paying him, let's just say $50,000.
Yeah.
Well, what's to say that he's from the state of Texas? Steve Sarkisian says, you know what? Come play for me. I got somebody to pay you $100,000.
Yeah. Right.
He just leaves. I think you're going to see that. Like I said, I don't know all the parameters of it, but I just think it's going to be a freaking mess. And it's going to, I just don't know what it's going to do to college athletics. I understand they deserve to get paid a little bit, but I just don't know what the right thing to do is. And I just think it's going to get ugly.
Well, and that's why some of the big questions there are going to be, do you cap how much they can make? And then, to me, the bigger question here is, does the money go into a trust, or do they get paid immediately? Now, look, I'm with you. I'm fine with them getting a little more than they're getting. But look, they're not going to get paid every other week like we do necessarily. That's not the goal here. But I think that is important. Now the talk is they would get the money after their eligibility runs out, or do they get paid immediately? I just don't. And you can certainly speak on the effect they would have to the chemistry of the team. That's been brought up a lot. With that, but still, we're just speculating here that this is so wide open that we really have no idea where it's going.
Yeah, and I was speaking with someone, I don't know if it was on my show or another show, but use Florida for example. Florida's a Nike school. Football and basketball are Jumpman, the Michael Jordan brand. But what if some high, say the state of Florida rep for Adidas contacts Emory Jones and says, you know what, we'll pay you $50,000 to wear the Adidas shoe. Now how's that going to work with the university when they're a Nike school?
Sure.
So there's all kinds of things that I think it's going to turn into a freaking mess. So, all right, Brent, let's kind of go around the SEC. What's going on in Tuscaloosa?
Well, I think the main thing there would be obviously, if folks missed it, the addition of Henry To'oto'o was huge. They've also had Brandon Turnage, who is a defensive back. He is in the transfer portal. Ronald Williams, another defensive back, has ended up transferring to Michigan State. So Alabama, like everybody else, have had a few players come and a few players go.
Yep. What about the Auburn Tigers?
Auburn's had more go than come as of late. Frankly, Camille Hayden, who's a defensive back, has entered the transfer portal. So they're kind of waiting to see what all is going to happen with that. Jaron Handy, defensive lineman Jay Hardy, and also quarterback Terrell Garnett and defensive back Chris Thompson have all entered the transfer portal. Look, when you get a new coach in Brian Harsin and all these kids were recruited by Gus Malzahn, you're going to have a little bit of that. So a lot of roster management going on for the Tigers too.
Yeah, the Gators finally get DeJuan Black after several years of trying to be a Gator. I don't know much about the kid, but congrats to him for finally. I know he went to JUCO. You know anything about DeJuan Black?
He's a really good prospect. He was at JUCO, as you said, at Mississippi Gulf Coast, and he really wound his way back, fortunately, to Florida. I think he was a pretty good prospect. during that time. I'm curious, Shane, where they're going to play him. He's 6'4", 216, so they'll put obviously some muscle on him as it goes along. He could play linebacker or safety, so it really just kind of depends on where they need him. But again, Shane, if you're bringing a JUCO guy in, he's going to be expected to play somewhat earlier than a typical high school senior then, right?
Yeah, you would think so. He's been trying to get here for a long time, and hopefully it all works out for him. Any news out up in Athens on the Georgia Bulldogs?
Some good reports about Zamir White, the running back, who has had not one but 2 ACL surgeries, and he's finally rounding into form with that. Shane, listen, it is mentally as tough as it is to get through one. You've got to be pretty strong, do you not, to get through 2? So, and this is going to be a really good running back room at Georgia. James Cook, Kendall Milton, Kenny McIntosh, and also Dejon Edwards, who they really like. So, obviously you've got your quarterback situation is good. They've got to rebuild the offensive line, but if they have to, they can run the ball and play defense until the passing game gets going.
Yeah. Brent, have you figured out yet why all the love for Mississippi State? I'm still confused at that.
Well, the good thing about it is with some of these revised ESPN top 25s, I don't see Mississippi State in there anywhere. So they are adding Jameer Calvin, who played for Mike Leach in 17 through 19, coming from Washington State. So, and Leach has lost a lot of players too through the transfer portal. So he's got a guy that he's familiar with. I still say this bunch is going to be pretty good in the next year or two when he gets his players in.
Brent, is A&M pretty much the only team in the West you think that can give Alabama a run this year?
LSU can.
You think LSU?
Yes. And as you and I discussed that today, A&M's got to find a quarterback. Will that be King? We're not sure. But A&M's got Weidenmeyer, the tight end. They've got to find some more receivers. They're absolutely loaded on the defensive line, as we've talked about before. And LSU, they already know who the quarterback's going to be. It's either going to be Miles Brennan, TJ Finley, obviously, is in the transfer portal, or Max Johnson. But pretty much their offensive and defensive lines come back. And their defensive line is going to be absolutely nasty at LSU. So that's basically what I see, Shane, is it's either going to be A&M or LSU. And A&M, as you know, their biggest games, including Alabama, they've got at home.
When you look at the SEC, Brent, and I don't know why, but for some reason I got this picture in my mind that obviously I know it's Florida, Georgia. They're clearly the 2 best teams. But I feel like, and I know Missouri, I think Drinkwitz has done a tremendous job. I like their quarterback. But for some reason, I think Tennessee is going to – I don't know how many wins they're going to have, but I think they're going to surprise some people because I think they're going to be fun to watch. Am I crazy to think that?
No, you're really not. Josh Heupel knows what to do offensively. They threw for nearly 1,000 yards in the spring game. I know that doesn't mean much, but that's what happened. Look, they're going to be awful defensively, but because they've lost so many players like Henry To'oTo'o, the linebacker. But when he finds a quarterback within those guys, and he will, I think you're right that they're going to be very exciting, and we'll be able to see them off the bat because they've moved that Bowling Green game to Thursday, September the 2nd. So they'll be on the SEC network. Shane, I'll be honest with you, on Labor Day weekend, Labor Day week, I don't understand why we don't have more SEC teams playing on that Thursday, and particularly that Sunday night.
Yeah, I agree. Last thing before we let you go, Brent, a couple ACC notes. 2 questions for you. Do you think De'Aaron King will be 100% when he rolls in? I guess it's in Atlanta against Alabama.
Yes.
And then do you think McKenzie Milton will be the starter at FSU?
They don't. Derek King has made considerable progress, but yet they don't know yet if he'll be ready for the Alabama game. So the backup there is going to be unusually important to find that out. Florida State's going to have a really good quarterback room. Jordan Travis, Mackenzie Milton, Purdy also is in that mix. He got hurt, and they kind of shelved him for the spring. But if Mackenzie Milton comes back, people need to remember he threw for 9,000 yards at UCF, and he's a really smart quarterback. So, Shane, could we say that they may be as good at quarterback this year, or at least have more options than they have in quite a while?
Well, that's true. That's true. And I think Mackenzie Milton's a good little player, so I'm anxious to see him compete in the ACC. Brent, great stuff as always, buddy. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next Thursday.
Can't wait, Shane. Take care, friend.
Yep, that's Brent Beaird. Join us on the Titan MR hotline. You can follow him on Twitter at Brent Beaird. Going to take our first time out of the pro. When we come back, we'll talk a little Gator baseball. We're going to talk with Gators Territory, Nick De La Torre on the Titan MR hotline. You're watching and listening to Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. We'll be right back.
Hey Gators, this is Coach Steve Spurrier. Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our gridiron sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, where you matter most. Peachland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Comfort Temp, comfort is our business, peace of mind is our promise. G-Tech Sport, keep your athletes in the game with G-Tech Sport. Celebration Point Town Center, Center State Bank, Chris Doring Mortgage. Some of our touchdown sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union, Adams Rib Company, Doreen Wiebe Realtor Caldwell Banker, M.M. Parish, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Wrap Spot, Okido America, Gators Dockside, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, TB Financial, Meadowbrook Golf Course, Darshakow Insurance. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, visit potupwithshane.com and click the Advertise button. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the show. If you like what we are doing here, make sure to follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Looking for all type of restaurant people, managers, servers, bartenders, hosts, cooks, dishwashers, bussers. If you think you're good in the restaurant business, then give us a call.
Spurrier's Gridiron Grill job fair is open now through May 15th. All you have to do is go to spurriersdraft.com and fill out an application.
We're looking for the good team members, and we're looking for people with a wonderful attitude that can make Spurrier's Gridiron Grill the best we can possibly be. To apply, go to spurriersdraft.com.
Welcome back to the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Celebration Points, where the Gators go to celebrate with premium brands like Regal Cinemas, Dave & Buster's, Nike, Palmetto Moon, Skechers, and coming summer of 2021, the HBC's new restaurant, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill and Visors Tailgate and Rooftop Bar. We will see you at Celebration Point, where the Gators go to celebrate. We're now going to go to the Titan MR hotline. We're going to be joined by Nick De La Torre. Works for Rivals.com, Gators Territory, does a tremendous job covering Gator baseball, especially. And Nick, good morning. How are you, my man?
Doing well. Anticipating the regional hosting sites being named today. Well, a pool of 20 of them. So it's wrapping up, and already booked my trip to Hoover. So
okay, so explain real quick, because I know they're doing 20 sites, but they're only going to actually have 16, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And we will not know the top 8 national seeds until all the conference tournaments are over, correct?
Correct. They have a selection show, which is noon Monday on ESPN2, following the SEC tournament, all the conference tournaments. And this is hopefully, knock on wood, the last of, the COVID anomalies with sports and all that stuff, because they're naming 20 sites. And normally you wouldn't get the national seeds and the hosts until after all the conference tournaments, but everything going into hosting and having 4 teams, there were a lot more things to be considered, including COVID testing and COVID screening for all of the players, staff, trainers that are going to be, of those 4 teams that are going in. What is your vicinity relationship to a hospital? Can you host safely all of these teams? So that's why you're going to be getting a pool of 20. Fairfield, for instance, a smaller school up north, was having a tremendous year, but they wouldn't be able to host 4 schools. So that's kind of what is going into naming the 20 potential sites. Everyone had to put in basically a bid, explain why they would be able to, physically hold a tournament. And then those 20 will be announced today. And then obviously the 16 of those 20 that, finish the season well and have the resume will be announced after the conference tournaments.
All right, we got 2 quick questions here for you, brought to you by Meldon Law, the only official law firm partner of the Florida Gators. Both from Dan. Dan said, 2-part question here. First, we'll go, Nick, will it be full capacity for fans for the College World Series? If you've heard anything about that. The second question is, what's with so many errors this year for the Gators?
The first one's easier. I don't think it'll be full capacity. You're starting to see more and more places announce full capacity for the fall. And Florida might even trend that way. Florida's going to follow UF Health and the guidelines of UF Health. I would guess right now, as we sit here on May 13th, that there would be a reduced capacity in Omaha. Hopefully Florida makes it there, because I love making that trip out to Omaha. So hopefully I'll be in capacity there. And then the errors, I haven't been able to put my finger on it. I mean, Florida's the worst fielding team in the SEC. And me, as a former baseball player, when I got to my first job covering the Gators, I got spoiled. I think since I've been here, this is my 9th season, they've won 2 national fielding percentage titles. Pitching and defense are the cornerstones of Kevin O'Sullivan's program. So to me, I would go, Florida would play, a Stony Brook or a Presbyterian, and I would watch them kick the ball around like a Little League team and just wonder what the heck's happening. And now watching Florida this year, they're the Little League team when it comes to defense. And I really can't understand it. Someone who's made, I think he's tied for the lead in errors, Josh Rivera. He's a big league ball player. And the first month of the season, he had 9 errors at shortstop. You can't play shortstop in the SEC. You can't play shortstop, in the Sun Belt and make 9 errors. You just can't do it. So to me, there's been no rhyme or reason to why. I know they practice fielding as much as anybody in the entire country. So it's been a real big shock for me, and I don't have an answer. And I don't know if you asked Kevin O'Sullivan that he would have an answer for you.
Yeah, it's definitely hasn't been a team that looks like a Kevin O'Sullivan coach team, because, as you said, it's all about pitching and defense with him, and they've struggled at times in those areas. All right, let's talk. I think this week's poll, Gators came out 9th in the country, I believe. I could be wrong, but I thought I saw that. The goal is obviously to be a top 8 seed, so you host that super regional. What, in your mind, Nick, do the Gators need to do to jump into that top 8 seed? In my opinion, they got to sweep Georgia and at least win 1 game against Arkansas and win a couple in Hoover. Am I wrong?
No. So right now, Florida's 15-9, and they have the number 21 RPI. The selection committee is not going to be considering RPI so much because there's a bunch of schools, the Big Ten, for instance, that are only playing conference schedules. So the RPI is a little skewed this year. I think Florida at 15-9 right now. If they go 3-3 versus Georgia and Arkansas, that gets them to 18-12, and that probably secures you a regional, one of the top 16 hosts. To sneak in to the top 8 is going to be tough, because right now I think the projected top 8 would be Arkansas. So getting a series win at Arkansas, if you go 5-1, sweeping Georgia, which is not, I would never want to say probable, but it's doable. Sweeping Georgia is doable. And then if you win a series over number 1 Arkansas, if they're still number 1, assuming they handle business at Tennessee, you still have Vanderbilt that's ahead of you, Texas, Mississippi State, TCU, Tennessee, Notre Dame. Notre Dame's had a really good season, and then Arizona. So I think if Florida were to go 5-1 and then win a couple games in Hoover, and it's tough. Kevin O'Sullivan doesn't really value the SEC tournament outside of getting his pitching rotation ready for regional play. He's not like Paul Maneri. Paul Maneri loves winning that tournament more than anybody in the world. But I think if you're Sully and you're thinking, hey, we went 4-2 over our last 6 or 5-1, and we need to win a couple games here to have a chance to host, all the way until Omaha, I think you could see him take a different approach in the NCAA tournament. But you're spot on, Shane, with 5-1 and win a couple games in Hoover, and you might be moving up to that top 8.
Yeah, you answered my other question because, I talked with Tim Walton yesterday because, in softball, you can pitch the same girl the entire tournament, doesn't matter. But as you mentioned, he wants to compete and win in Tuscaloosa this week, but the big picture starts next week. But I think it's a little different for the Gators now. As you mentioned, if we do go, say, 5-1 the next 2 weeks, how does Sully approach trying to win a couple more games to possibly sneak into the top 8? So it'd be interesting to see how that all plays out. Nick, let me ask you this, and you may not know the answer, but, the SEC girls of the softball tournament travels from school to school.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't they do that for the baseball tournament? Why is it always in Hoover?
I don't know. I have some horror stories in Hoover. There was, rain delays. It's really tough. Baseball games are a lot longer than softball. And the first couple days at Hoover, they've got 4 baseball games. So if there's a 30-minute rain delay, and then let's say an extra inning game, if you're that fourth game of the day, you're sweating it. You're thinking, please don't have first pitch be at 10 p.m. Central Time. I don't know. I would love. There was talk about a couple of years back. There was talk about moving it to Nashville. I think the SEC likes having it right there in their backyard in Hoover. And I don't know. I don't want to make people mad, but I don't think the stadium is that great, and I don't think the city's that great. I would love to see it rotate around. I mean, the amount of money that the SEC baseball programs are putting into their stadiums. Alabama built a new stadium a little while back. Basically, everyone except for Vanderbilt's got a new stadium. I would love to see it rotate around. I'm not sure why, other than history and keeping a streak alive, or Greg Sankey only has to take like a 10-minute car ride to get to the SC baseball tournament. I'm not sure why they don't switch it around, because I would love to see it move around, and I would love to go see Duty Noble Stadium, and the schools out in the SC West have such a passionate, smart fan base. I mean, you would get 20,000 people at Ole Miss if you had the SC baseball tournament there.
Yeah, I just think it'd be great for the league if they rotated it like they do with the softball tournament. Nick, when you look back at this season, it's coming to a close. I know a lot of Gator fans say it's kind of been a disappointing year because I think being the unanimous number 1 team, the way it started, but really you get into postseason play, it really doesn't matter what you've done.
Right.
once you get to the dance, that's all that matters. And I think I was talking about it and kind of going over it in my head a little bit on my podcast on Tuesday. I think because of the way Florida started in 2020 and with only losing Austin Langworthy and Brady Smith, we gave them a lot of benefit of the doubt. But if you go back to the 2019 season, I can tell you how horrible it is to drive from Dallas to Lubbock. And we forget that 2019 team struggled a lot once it got into SEC play. And those are kind of all the same guys that were on this team. So it was going to be tough because the way that not only myself, but everyone, national guys, Kendall Rogers, Aaron Fitt and Baseball America, everyone was talking about Florida as this powerhouse that was going to just run roughshod through the league and through everybody, and that's not realistic. No one's ever gone 56-0 in baseball. That's not going to happen. But I think the issues are what's made this season frustrating is what we go back to with the first question was the pillars of Kevin O'Sullivan programs aren't there, and Florida fans aren't used to seeing errors, leading the league in errors. Nonetheless, they aren't used to seeing. For better or worse, Kevin O'Sullivan, in 2016 was on the cover of Baseball America. They were calling him Pitching You with Brady Singer and Faedo. And I just don't think Florida has one of those, Friday night shutdown kind of guys. So I think the biggest frustration has been what you've taken for granted in years past as that's just going to happen. And hopefully Florida hits enough. I think
that's what's been the bugaboo and been the issue, something that you've taken for granted in years past, which is frustrating. And you could probably say the same. Florida fans have taken football defense for granted. And then when you see that the defense is the issue in 2020, it's even more frustrating because it's, hey, we finally have an offense. And if only the defense could do something, what could have happened this year? And I think you're almost seeing a similar situation in baseball because you're leading the conference with errors and your bullpen kind of blows up, at least once a week.
Speaking of pitching, and like I said, you watch a lot more baseball than I do, but I do feel like we have as good a Sunday starter as I've seen in a long time in Hunter Barco. Am I crazy for saying that?
No, I've kind of likened him to AJ Puck, where I think it's just mental with him at times. And you'll see he gives up a hit or he gives up a home run, and that kind of leads to a big inning where you would like to, and it's easier said than done, telling a 19-year-old kid, hey, forget about that 500-foot home run you just gave up, get out of the inning. And so, good luck. He's going to be has the potential to be a top 10 overall pick next year with being a left-hander, being 6'4", and the way that he throws and the stuff that he has. That's been a luxury for Kevin O'Sullivan teams. I mean, you had, Jackson Coher starting on Sundays, and you've had a long list of Sunday guys, but I think he has the potential, and the MLB draft is a lot about projecting potential. And I think that's why, I think next year we'll be talking about Hunter Barco as a top 10 pick.
Speaking of that, we just got a text from John on the Titan Mar text line. He says, Nick, how many Gators will be drafted
this year?
Yeah.
A lot. I was running through the roster to try to show somebody, just how different the team will be next year. I mean, Jacob Young can be drafted. Judd Fabian can be drafted. Kendrick Callaway, I think, is gone. Nathan Hickey's gone. Christian Scott gone. Jordan Butler gone. David Lucci can be gone. Of course, Tommy Mace and Jack Leftwich, Corey Acton. Kirby McMullen's going to be gone. Chris Armstrong is going to be drafted as a 6'4", 230-pound switch hitting power hitter. He's gone. Ben Speck can be drafted. And Franco Alamon, I think, is going to be gone. So I just named most of the field.
Sound like the entire team.
Yeah. So that's another reason why when you were looking at Florida coming into this year and whether or not we should have used this as a metric and as a measuring stick, you look at it and you go, well, it has to be this year because look at all these guys that can be drafted and will be gone. And then you have to worry about with the NCAA passing the one-time transfer rule, which I'm for. I think it gives the players a little bit more power, maybe where they haven't had it in the past. But then you have to wonder, a guy like Brandon Sproat, who is a sophomore and throws 98 miles an hour, he's going to garner some MLB interest. But he's only made 13 appearances this year. Does he go somewhere where, a smaller school maybe that'll tell him, hey, we'll put you on Friday nights? Because that's not going to happen at Florida. I'd assume Hunter Barco would take over the Friday night role for Florida next year. So it's going to be an interesting offseason. But, yeah, there's a lot of draft talent. Jordan Butler's another guy. I don't think I mentioned him. He's another guy who will probably get drafted, and I would expect to go.
When you look at Judd Fabian, he leads the team with 18 home runs, and it seems like he's had a horrible year. You know what I mean? I was totally shocked when I looked. I knew that he's gotten hot here lately, hitting a bunch of multiple home runs in games. But how would you assess or evaluate how he's played this year?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that was the issue or most surprising to me was the strikeout rate. Through the first month of the season, he was striking out at a 38% clip. Which, listen, I don't really recognize the Major League Baseball game anymore. I think, the way that they're allowed to strike out now, if Ryan Howard was 10 years younger, the old Phillies first baseman, he might be a Hall of Famer now. They kicked him out of the league because he struck out too much. So the game is changing, but you obviously don't want to see someone like that, strike out that much. He's changed his approach, and his strikeouts are way down over the last 5-6 weeks. I think the biggest and the most interesting thing with Judd is coming into the year, he was considered a top 5 pick, the best college bat in the country. the thing with him is that he enrolled early. And I think a lot of Gator fans are probably football fans first, and they think, oh, enrolling early, that's normal. Not a big deal. That doesn't happen in baseball. That means you're skipping your senior year of baseball. So it's a really unique situation. That means he's a year younger. Because of COVID, he's technically a sophomore, not a junior, which means he can come back to school 2 more times. Judd Fabian can really put a number out there and say, hey, meet this, or I'm going back to school. And if he comes back, now he's just playing with his own age group. So I think the leverage Judd has is incredible. And if he's drafted, 28th in the first round, it might be hard for a team to meet that number. His brother, Derek, is also going to be a Florida Gator next year. So coming back for Judd is not a bad thing at all. And I think the way that this year has gone, that's really interesting. I don't think the family has treated this year as boom or bust for the draft, just given all of those factors I just said. So Judd Fabian on a 2022 Florida baseball team sounds very exciting.
I agree with that. Me. Last thing for you, Nick, 2-part question. Who's the best player you've seen in the SEC this year? And do you think an SEC team will win it all in Omaha?
It's wild. I mean, the top 4 teams in the country right now are all SEC teams, and you could be looking at potentially 6 SEC teams hosting a regional. I think an SEC team will win it all this year. In terms of best player, I mean, I was able to get to see Kumar Rocker and able to get to see Jack Leiter. Neither of them had really good performances against Florida. I think Gunnar Hoglund might be. He was one of the ones that I saw. I'm really looking forward to watching Kopp, who's Arkansas's closer. Right now, I mean, they're bringing him into the 7th inning of games to close games out, get 9 outs. And it's rare that a reliever has enough innings to be considered for any kind of ERA titles, stuff like that. But he does, and he leads the nation in ERA. So I think Kopp from Arkansas might be the best that I will see. And then one other one that isn't being talked about, Enrique Bradfield, who was a freshman. He was Jordan Carrion's high school teammate, Vanderbilt's freshman center fielder.
Fastest guy I've ever seen.
He is a totally different ball player than what the MLB is looking for right now. But I think he plays, and I think he's a future Major League Baseball player. Not going to hit for power, but he's going to cover from left center to right center. He's going to steal bases. He's going to get on base at a ridiculous clip. And he was just a really, really fun player to watch.
All right, Nick, let everybody know how they can check out your podcast, check out all your work.
The podcast is Stadium and Gale. It's we put it up wherever you consume your podcasts, and we appreciate you listening there. I'm at Gators Territory. It's florida.rivals.com, and you can find me on social media at Torre.
Good stuff, my man. Appreciate you taking the time. We'll talk to you soon. Hopefully Gators can find a way to get hot here at the end of the year. See you,
anytime,
Nick.
Shane. Thanks for having me.
That's Nick Torre. Join us on the Titan Tomorrow Hotline. Going to take our final time out of the program today. Come back, wrap up this Thursday edition.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our gridiron sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, where you matter most. Peachland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Comfort Temp, comfort is our business, peace of mind is our promise. G-Tech Sport, keep your athletes in the game with G-Tech Sport. Celebration Point Town Center, Center State Bank, Chris Doring Mortgage. Some of our touchdown sponsors are Big Mills Cheesesteaks, MB Listing, Cornerstone Financial, McDonald's of Gainesville, My IT Masters, Gainesville Neon and Signs, 84 Lumber, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Chick-fil-A on Archer Road, Avra and Smith, Dowling Signs, Chomp Carter Apparel, Ruse Ogra Agent, State Farm Insurance, Silver Cube Billiards and Sports Bar. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, visit potupwithshane.com and click the Advertise button. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the show. If you like what we are doing here, make sure to follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Welcome back to the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Center State Bank is becoming South State Bank. We still put business first. We understand that small businesses need a community business partner that they can rely on. South State will have 4 convenient Alachua County locations. South State Bank, banking forward, member FDIC. I want to thank Brent Beaird and Nick De La Torre joining us on the Titan MR Highline. Hope you enjoyed it. They always have great information. Make sure you tell all your friends to follow our program. Check us out on all the different platforms that you can watch. Today's show's a wrap. Be safe out there, folks. Today's show's a wrap, brought to you by Wrap Spot. See you tomorrow.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills.